The room went silent when Elena placed her wedding ring on the dinner table. She did not scream. She did not slap anyone. She did not even cry in front of them. She simply looked at her husband, Daniel, then at the woman sitting beside him, and said with a calmness that frightened everyone more than anger ever could, "You can have the life you chose. I will no longer fight for a place in it." Then she turned around and walked toward the door. What nobody in that beautiful house understood was that Elena was not walking away from her marriage because she was weak. She was walking away because she had finally remembered her worth. If you believe that humanity, dignity, forgiveness, and second chances can change lives, take a moment to like this video, share it with someone who needs hope, and subscribe to Humanity Tales for more emotional stories about courage, kindness, and the strength of the human heart. For 12 years, Elena had believed that marriage meant standing beside someone through everything. She had been there when Daniel started his small business from a rented office with 2 employees. She had supported him when investors rejected him, stayed awake beside him when he worked until sunrise, and sold some of her own jewelry when the company needed emergency money. When Daniel finally became successful, people called him a self-made businessman. Elena smiled whenever she heard it, because she knew how much of their life had been sacrificed behind that success. She never asked for recognition. She only wanted a peaceful home where the 2 of them could grow old together. But success slowly changed Daniel. The man who once came home exhausted and grateful began coming home distracted and distant. His phone was always turned face down. His schedule became filled with unexplained meetings. Elena noticed the changes but tried to convince herself that stress was responsible. She remembered the promises they had made years earlier and refused to believe that the man she loved could betray them. Then, one evening, everything became impossible to deny. At a family dinner, Daniel arrived late with a woman named Victoria. She was confident, beautifully dressed, and completely comfortable in a house where Elena had spent years creating a home. Daniel introduced her as someone who worked closely with the company, but the way they looked at each other told Elena that the truth was much deeper. The worst part was not Victoria's presence. It was Daniel's expression. He looked at Victoria with the ease and attention he had once reserved for Elena. Elena felt something inside her break, but she refused to give them the scene they seemed to expect. She did not compete with Victoria. She did not insult her. Instead, Elena quietly watched the people around the table lower their eyes, suddenly uncomfortable with the truth everyone had been avoiding. That night, Elena finally asked Daniel whether he still wanted their marriage. He did not answer immediately. His silence became the answer. For days, Elena struggled with the decision. She walked through the house remembering birthdays, anniversaries, Christmas mornings, hospital waiting rooms, and countless ordinary evenings when they had laughed over simple meals. Leaving was not easy because she was not only leaving a husband. She was leaving a lifetime of memories. Her mother told her that sometimes loving someone meant knowing when to let them go. Her closest friend reminded her that forgiveness did not mean accepting disrespect. Slowly, Elena began to understand something she had forgotten. She could forgive Daniel without returning to him. She packed a few belongings into 2 suitcases and moved into a small apartment across town. It was nothing like the enormous house she had shared with Daniel. The kitchen was tiny. The windows were old. The furniture was mismatched. Yet on her first night there, Elena slept more peacefully than she had in months. Meanwhile, Daniel believed he had won. He assumed Elena would eventually return. He had always been confident that she would forgive him because she had forgiven him before. He continued building his relationship with Victoria and began making decisions that mixed his personal life with his business. Victoria encouraged him to distance himself from the people who questioned their choices. Daniel listened. That was his greatest mistake. Elena had never been involved in the company's public image, but she had been involved in its foundation. She knew the contracts, the investors, the employees, and the promises Daniel had made when the company was still struggling. When she formally separated from him, she also withdrew from several financial agreements she had legally signed years earlier. That decision triggered questions from the company's investors. Soon, an audit uncovered several reckless financial decisions Daniel had made while trying to impress new partners and maintain an extravagant lifestyle. Money that should have been protecting the company had been spent carelessly. Investors became nervous. Business partners stepped away. Employees who had once trusted Daniel began searching for other jobs. Within months, the powerful businessman everyone admired was struggling to keep his company alive. Daniel finally realized that Elena had never been the person holding him back. She had been the person quietly holding everything together. He called her repeatedly. At first, Elena did not answer. When she finally agreed to meet him, she chose a small cafe near her apartment. Daniel looked completely different from the man who had once walked into rooms expecting everyone to listen. His confidence was gone. He asked her to come home. Elena looked at him for a long moment. She could see regret in his eyes, but she could also see fear. Daniel was not only afraid of losing her anymore. He was afraid of losing the life he had built. She told him that she hoped he found peace, but she could not return to the person she had been before. She had spent too many years shrinking herself to keep someone else comfortable. Daniel asked if she hated him. Elena shook her head. "No," she said. "I simply stopped abandoning myself to keep you." Those words stayed with him long after she left. Years later, Elena's life looked completely different. She had opened a small design studio using the skills she had once put aside for Daniel's career. Her work became successful because it reflected something she had learned during the hardest chapter of her life: beauty means nothing when it comes at the cost of peace. Daniel eventually rebuilt a modest business, but he never recovered the empire he once had. Victoria was no longer beside him. The people who had surrounded him during his wealthy years had disappeared, leaving him to face the consequences of his choices. Elena, however, had gained something money could never buy: peace. She learned that walking away is not always defeat. Sometimes it is the bravest form of self-respect. She discovered that you do not have to destroy another person to save yourself. You do not have to fight for a place in someone's heart when they have already chosen to give that place away. And perhaps the most beautiful part of her story was that Elena did not become bitter. She became wiser, kinder, and stronger. She forgave without forgetting, moved forward without revenge, and built a new life without needing Daniel to lose everything for her to feel whole. Before we reach the final moment, comment, "I choose dignity," if you believe walking away from disrespect can sometimes be an act of courage rather than weakness. If this story touched your heart, please like the video, share it with someone who may need this message, and subscribe to Humanity Tales. Sometimes the greatest victory is not watching someone else fall, it is finding the courage to stand again after they tried to break your heart. Elena never fought her husband's mistress. She never competed, begged, or destroyed anyone. She simply walked away. And in the end, Daniel learned the truth far too late: sometimes you don't realize the value of the person standing beside you until the day they finally stop standing there.